In a simple way, I just view something as better than nothing. I mean, I'd rather have 85% of billions of revenue than 100% of nothing. And, I know what kind of investors think is a catalyst for these companies, AMD and Nvidia. And clearly it's higher growth and upward revisions. And, that revenue had to come out of those forecasts and street estimates. And now it can go back in. I get it that people never like when the government's going to take a public company's money, but they're kind of doing that with tariffs already. So I think this is just another way, another form of that opens the door for, I think, a lot more revenue down the road, potentially, as Nvidia, now can, sell different versions of the chip in the future, hopefully, and the government can kind of take their cut. Who knows what they're going to do with that and how they're going to position it, but I'm sure they'll have a positive take on why they're getting this revenue and what they're going to use it for.
So let's go to what the president said, and I'll read back part of it. He said the H20, he called it it's an old chip. China already has it in a different form with a different name. Is that true?
Well, they have a lot of existing H20s from when they were allowed to purchase them before the government, made it illegal. I'm not sure exactly what he means that they have it in a different form or under a different name. I think most people are aware that chips were probably illegally flowing through back channels into China, or those Chinese companies were gaining access to the computing power in offshore locations. So I wouldn't say that, and it is an older chip. Obviously, it's the Hopper generation. They're on Blackwell. I think the bigger question will be, will they, Trump and the administration allow an upgraded version of H20, like some sort of scaled down Blackwell going forward? The other thing to remember is that I have not heard, nor do we think that the US government's going to allow China to gain access to high bandwidth memory. And that's pretty important when you're training and running these massive AI models, is that you need this high performance DRAM memory, which Micron, Hynix, and Samsung make. And for all intents and purposes, that's still blocked.
Do you think, though, this creates a precedent where companies can pay to play in restricted markets like China? And how do you think moving forward this will shape enforcement?
Well, I think that's kind of what some of the media and the experts were saying when they looked at this, is that it opens the door for more AI relationships that are going to be built around how much do you want to pay the government to allow it, meaning the government is relaxing this control or restriction that was supposed to protect US interests and allowing it if they can get a cut of the money. So in some form, it does seem a little, unfair, or something that maybe isn't in the best interest of the United States. But at the end of the day, these are the only relationships or agreements that have been set up thus far. And I think the US is going to be very careful to signal more of these type of relationships, meaning I don't think there's just going to be a free-for-all of companies who want to start selling high-end technology into China to sign deals and say, oh, we'll just pay you for this, and then open the door. Like chip equipment companies, I don't think they're going to get approval to sell leading edge tools into China. If you see that, then all bets are off, meaning the US they're going to allow advanced production tools to go back into China, then I think they can pretty much allow anything. And until I see that, I don't think that's the case.
Is there any transparency on how the government plans to use the proceeds from this 15% share? And do you think this will be reinvested, for instance, in US tech competitiveness?
Well, I don't think the government's even given us great clarity on how they're using the global tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs, right? I mean, they're basically helping it to fund government operations and offset spending, right, and deficits. My sense is they'll come up with something that seems very palatable and acceptable to the public and investors, to say, this isn't just money going into the Treasury or the Department of Commerce budget, that we're going to use this to plow back into R&D and investment into U.S. semiconductor technology. But honestly, that remains to be seen. And I think they'll keep their options open as opposed to tying that up into some specific plan right away.
Jordan, from a national security perspective, one of the concerns that that the security community had essentially was, okay, well, if the US doesn't give China access to this technology, then it's just going to provide an incentive for the country to invest in their own technology and do this in a way that could actually end up being better than American companies. Is that your view? And if yes, does this prevent them from doing that or slow them down at all? Does it decrease that incentive?
I think that's the key term, decreases that incentive. And I do believe that this is what Jensen Huang at Nvidia, that was his case to be made to President Trump and why we should allow these chips to be sold into China, that this would keep them heavily reliant upon US technology as opposed to going elsewhere or trying to develop it at a faster pace on their own. Nothing's going to stop China from trying to become as independent on semiconductor AI technology going forward because they see the risk in relying heavily on the United States. But it takes a long time. You need the R&D, you need the development tools, and the United States pretty much controls a lot of that. And as a result, I think this is in our best interest for the time being, is that we have more kind of the control or the upper hand at what they get, how fast they get it, as opposed to all of a sudden, them turning around and having better technology at a faster development pace than would have been the case if they didn't have access to this.